So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening to you all. Within our session of tonight, which is within the continuous series of lectures from the Oman Organ Transplantation Society. So with the name of the society, we would like to welcome our honored speakers of tonight who will be sharing their valuable experience and discussing about how to establish donations and transplantation programs. The name of our lecture tonight is Establishing a Disease Donor Program Transplantation Program, and it is United Arab Emirates Experience. I would like to introduce our speakers of tonight. We are delightful to have three speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Ali Abdul Karim Al-Ubaidali. He is a consultant nephrologist and a transplant physician at Sahha Kidney Care, part of Abu Dhabi Health Service Company. He is the chairman of the United Arab Emirates National Transplant Committee. He is the deputy chair of the Department of Health Higher Committee of Human Organ and Tissue Donations and Transplantation, as well as he's a member of the GCC Transplant Committee. Dr. Ali completed his medical degree from the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. Then he moved to Toronto in Canada to finish his internal medicine and nephrology. He also achieved his American Board and Canadian Royal College certificate in internal medicine, nephrology, and also the United Network of Organ Sharing certificate in transplant nephrology. Dr. Ali acquired multiple training in leadership from different boards. He also acquired and received various national awards. So Dr. Ali, welcome to our session tonight. Our second speaker will be Dr. Eduardo Sosa. He is an intensivist consultant and an organ donation coordinator. He is an ECMO team coordinator and DCD program coordinator. He is originally from a graduate from Comebra University, and he graduated in 1994, basically, but he has been working for many years now in organ transplantations, and he will be sharing his experience with us tonight about the coordinations of organ transplantation. Our third speaker, welcome, Dr. Eduardo. Our third speaker will be Dr. Reginaldo Carlos. He is a physician and he is a nephrologist. He is a graduate from Brazil, and he has been with collaborations with different institutions as an organ recruitment organizers. And he has been a leader in some of the university, and he has been doing the coordination in the kidney transplant basically for many years. He has been now for a few months in the United Arab Emirates, and we will be delightful to hear his experience. So Dr. Ali, we would like to start with you tonight. So please, the stage is yours. And if you'd like to share any slides, please use the icon at the bottom of the screen where it says share screens.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. Let me see if we can share the slide. I think I also have Ms. Amina, our colleague, if she could, I think it was a large kind of file, just trying to see if it's here.
There is somebody here saying, Ayman, is he from your side, Dr. Ali?
Yes, yes, Ayman as well as from our side. So if
we will give him. Yeah, we'll give him the.
Yeah, this is an iPad, so it's not a computer. It's,
okay.
So we'll give him the panelist access so he can share the slides.
Yes. I mean, if you can just raise your hand so we can see you among the participants.
Or Amina. Either Ayman or Amina. Okay. Okay, I think we have Ayman on board.
Yes.
Yes, Ayman now with us.
Can you unmute yourself, Dr. Ayman? So
yeah, I will share the slide. One second.
Please. Okay.
Well, thank you again for the kind introduction. So would like to take you through our journey in UAE of what did it take for us to start deceased donation, and hopefully there are some common themes that we can all collaborate so that our journey could be as fast as possible. I have no relevant disclosures, and UAE, as you know, is part of the GCC, and we enjoy being a very diverse community. And this audience knows UAE very well, so I wouldn't elaborate here. Thank you. We have since the brain death declaration law since 2016, and we started from 2017 to activate donation after death. And we have multiple international collaborations, as I will highlight. This audience also knows that organ donation and tissue donation saves lives and improves quality of life. So a donor could be saving up to 8 lives. And also when we talk about tissues, of course, save between 50 to 75, improve the quality of life of those people who need tissues. Now, globally, there is an issue because the Global Observatory, and this number keeps growing a little bit year after year, but it's still way far from the global demand on organ donation. So if you see the 2019 Global Observatory data, you see that there are 153,000 solid organ transplanted, but this represents less than 10% of the global demand and need. And as you can see, the kidney transplantation is 2/3 of the global transplant solid organ activity. And this means that we need to work really hand in hand on prevention as much as we work on providing donation opportunities. And when it comes to donation, of course, we have to really work very fast if we wanted to save the maximum number of lives. In UAE, in brief, our journey with transplantation in general started since 1985. This was when we had a sporadic number of cases done in one of the main hospitals called Al Mafraq Hospital. At that, since 85 up until the early 90s, we had nearly 62 donations. And 2 of them were deceased, and deceased from abroad as gift or as a donation. But then, the second phase was when we started to have a single center transplantation program in collaboration with Cleveland Clinic Foundation at Sheikh Khalifa Medical City since 2008. And this single center program started to do roughly 50 kidney transplants a year since that time. Followed by the accreditation of our multi-organ transplant program at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi. Soon after that hospital was commissioned a few years back. And then followed that, we had a number of other kidney transplants. Now, since 2017, as I alluded, this was the time when we had our law activated to start deceased donation. And I think I should also highlight that we started to train and to host conferences way before the law was activated. So you can see we hosted MESA 2012. We had various trainings and collaborations with external OPOs. So we started to prepare for what was coming in terms of deceased donation law and activation. So today we have 7 transplant programs, 2 for pediatric and 5 for adult, and 1 multi-organ transplantation. And I have reflected on those, but recently we added Al Jalila Pediatric Transplant Hospital in Dubai, Dubai Hospital for adult, and Al Qasimi Hospital in Sharjah for adult as well, in addition to the existing Mediclinic, Cleveland Clinic, and both 2 hospitals, Sheikh Khalifa Medical City and Sheikh Shakhboub Medical City for kidney transplantation. The only multi-organ transplant in UAE is Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. So all this was to prepare that we have, as you know, UAE is a federation. We have the Ministry of Health and Prevention. We have this National Transplant Committee, and then recently there has been an office for the organ and tissue donation and transplantation. And then, as you can also see, that operating or operationalizing organ donation requires that the individual Emirates like Abu Dhabi or Dubai or the rest of the Emirates, that hospitals adopt certain best practice procedures to make it active. So in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, we have the Higher Committee for Human Organ and Tissue Transplantation, Donation and Transplantation, and likewise similar committee exists in Dubai. And these federal and local structures are very important to support the activities that goes on in every hospital to assure them of the medical legal and of any concerns that they have to start applying the new laws to permit families to be able to donate if they wish so. And I think this is a different representation of what I just elaborated. So it's the same thing. But now, what about the results? Let's go to results. So in 2017, we had 3 deceased donors, followed, as you can see, in 2018, 8 deceased donors, 2019, 10, and then 2020, we had 9. It was 2021 when we started to have a budget for donation and the initial part of putting together an organ procurement organization. And that year we had, last year, 39 donors. And these 39 donors, as you will see, contributed to 147 transplants. Next slide. So you can see here on this that you see in the numbers in the circle is how many organs could be donated from an individual, one deceased donor. And this is a metric that we really try to hold ourselves accountable for, meaning that if we don't have, let's say, the capability for, or we may not have the relevant recipient in the United Arab Emirates for a heart transplant or a lung or a liver, we immediately share it with other countries. So this is why, for example, we had 39 donors in 2021, but we always try to either utilize the organs in the country or share it abroad. And so the number of transplanted organs per deceased, you see in the circles 3.9, 3.8. And you can also see how many beneficiaries, how many people benefited from transplantation on the graphs. So starting last year it was 35, but this year was 147. The organ donation sharing, we used to have it active with Saudi Arabia, but now we are also active in sharing organs or transplantation capacity with Kuwait. And we also started to share organs with Pakistan. We shared with them a liver and a kidney to help them start deceased donation. Next slide. These are, again, the different types of organs. But more or less, I think you see the liver, the heart, and the lung, and the pancreas. The majority, as you can see, it's a kidney transplantation. Now, this slide also highlights that what I was highlighting, that we use 75% of the organs. We used it in the United Arab Emirates, and in the early days when our liver, heart, and lung were not ready, we were always sharing with Saudi. And then gradually, as we were commissioning our program, we then started to transplant in the country. And if at any point, so 23% of the organs we shared with Saudi Arabia. Now, I think recently we have, as I said, Pakistan is also receiving. And also the distribution between pediatrics and adults, you can see there. So in terms of statistics, it's useful to excite the leadership here so that we get more budget and more support. I always say organ donation is like blood donation. If we don't have a blood bank, we can't expect the public to be able to donate blood. And same applies. If we don't have the infrastructure for donation or deceased donation, it's very difficult for the public. It's never the public not willing to donate. It's always the system not being in place. Yes, the public engagement is important to increase the rate of the donation, but to be able to start donation, if you have the infrastructure, or if you collaborate to jointly have the infrastructure in place, you will immediately be able to start deceased donation, provided that the legislation allows it. So these are some statistics about how the numbers over the years. Now, we try to highlight also for the leadership in different formats. So it's useful to have infographic and to try to highlight that when certain key achievements were highlighted. So I think organ donation and transplantation works hand in hand. And if we don't have enough donation, it's very difficult for the transplant programs to plan, to invest, and to hire more surgeons and more professionals. So we incorporated these details into making sure that the regulatory authority, for example, in the Department of Health in Abu Dhabi, they adopted the best practice international KPIs as part of their JODA KPI. So all hospitals are mandated to follow this practice and to collaborate with the organ donation agency. This is another way of looking at it, is that, an organ procurement organization is very important, that we need to be pushing for organ donation maturity as much as we also want to support transplantation, because in my years of working with my colleagues in the GCC and also the Middle East, it's noticed that we tend to invest more in transplant, and we may not think that donation also requires some effort, some team, some expertise. So on one side, you see the optimization and donation. It requires the community aspects, the professionals, establishing a database, as you can see, partnerships. And through these partnerships, one can start way faster than if we take everything on our own. And then on the other side, you also see that we need to really improve the transplantation per million population, and this requires some governmental support. Now, it is very important that we think about, as I said in the beginning, the Global Observatory says that we really are not even touching the surface, and it's like the tip of the iceberg of how many people need donation versus how many organs could be there. The global demand is, we are only meeting 10%. So the concept of expanding the donor pool is very important. if we apply very restricted view of who could be a perfect donor, then we may be missing many more opportunities. And in fact, we may also be depriving some families of their wish to be donors. So it's important to maximize the referrals, to think of also utilizing the extended criteria donors, those marginal donors, because we have to remember that even we may think of an organ not as an ideal organ, but when it comes to kidney transplantation, there are lots of data to prove that a marginal kidney or donor would still provide survival advantage to somebody who is on dialysis. Then there are lots of details about, the ex vivo or, utilizing some technology and some innovations to allow more time for evaluating organs. So all these are different techniques of expanding the donor pool and trying to provide maximum support. Now, traditionally, I think most countries find it easier to start donation after brain death, but donation after circulatory or cardiac death is also something that we really need not to forget about. And it's always easier concept for the public to grasp a donation after cardiac death, although logistically and regulation, it requires additional work to be able to do DCD. When we started UAE, and this is how countries are compared, is like the size of the population, and then it's a donation per million population. So you see Spain on one hand, and Croatia and Portugal, as we will hear from Dr. Sousa. So Spain is really nearly 50 per million population. And when we started, we were like 1 or 1.1. I think our latest analysis is that we are 4 or 4.5 per million population donation-wise, last year's statistics. Now, we can learn from also countries that were a few years ago very low in donation. So Spain, you could say, well, it's a big challenge because they were really high in donation for a long time. But think about Croatia, small country, less than half the size of UAE in terms of population. A few years ago, they used to have very low donation, but now they are either second or third in terms of donation per million population. And I think we have lots of learnings to get from the Croatian model of what does it take for us to start successful deceased donation per million population. And there are various statistics. You could look at living donation per million population. You could look at liver per million population or heart. But I think we can skip through these because there are different ways of looking at different programs. But we are keeping an eye so that we try to address the different challenges that we have. Now, this is a metric that I think it's really useful for us, for the GCC, and for us to be able to collaborate, because if we keep, it's maybe unfair that we, with the very low rate of donation, that we compare ourselves to other countries on the list. However, I think in 2021, we can say that, we have now started to have a reasonable donation rate now, because we emphasize on always utilizing an organ either in the UAE or abroad. I think this is a basis that it will improve, organ sharing systems. And also we really need to work on donor maintenance. So the different intensive care units need to also adopt this practice of how to maintain the donor in the various organs of a potential donor in good shape. It's something that requires additional training, but it's also an early referral is key, because organ donation team can really provide early feedback. So this is a good metric, and in UAE we believe in sharing. So and we see organ payback as 100%. So our colleagues in Kuwait, they collaborate with us, and we give them back 100% of the organs that they refer to us, and we place their patients on our waiting list. I should also say that organ donation and transplant in UAE is I think the number of donors nationalities were 13 or 14 nationalities, and those who benefited were from 21 nationalities. So UAE demographics is such that this program is from everybody to everybody. Yeah, next slide. Okay. So in terms of economics and health benefits, I'm a nephrologist, so although we can do our best to optimize dialysis outcomes, but it doesn't compare to offering them kidney transplantation. In terms of cost, it's more costly. And in terms of survival advantage is also much better. So in 10 years survival for 100 individuals who start on dialysis, in 10 years you may have 15 to 20 of them alive. But with transplant, you have 80% of them alive. So really, dialysis should be a bridge for anybody who doesn't have an absolute contraindication. And there are various details. So even those who receive, extended criteria organs, or those who even seniors who are elderly would also get survival advantage from transplantation. Next. So I think there are lots of details about the cost benefits, but I think we can skip through these and we can share them just for the interest of time. And there are these data are reproducible from multiple countries. Now, it's very important that we really adopt a flexible way to deceased donation, because the more strict we become and the more we take time, the more some patients are left with really being exploited. So I think the commercial and transplant tourism and organ trafficking flourishes and becomes really an issue if deceased donation and living donation are not facilitated. So we were all part of the Istanbul Declaration. We met in Dubai 2007, and then the following year we met in Istanbul. So this declaration became really an international one, translated to almost all languages. So the Istanbul Declaration actually gives lots of flexibility that many programs may not be aware of, that we are, I think we can proceed to the next slides. So if we don't implement many of the good practices and good principles, I think it's really difficult to combat transplant tourism and commercialism. Next. So, some of these principles are that compassionate support in supporting an organ donor family, this is fully legitimate, and we attended some forums with the Transplantation Society that various countries actually do support donor families in a way that is not considered an incentive, but rather a compassionate support. And these are the principles of Istanbul Declaration as well. Next. Yeah, next. And I think, I'm just highlighting that there are lots of opportunities for us to be able to implement deceased donation without having the additional, concern about, certain things, center bottlenecks that may be an obstacle to donation. Actually is fully legitimate and fully allowed, and that's what we do. Now, recently also, even in this last year, 6 months ago, there was this workshop organized through the WHO and also more than 62 countries. Again, some of the best practices were highlighted that it's really beneficial that countries should proceed and allow the public to donate by putting the right systems in place. There are lots of details, as I highlighted, 63 countries, and there are lots of principles that really, with some focus and some investment into the donation principles, you would see lots of values that it will support economically a country as well as patient outcomes. And I think this graph is also useful, that when it comes to kidney failure, I think if you visit any hospital, including, or any country, including UAE, you will see the majority of people are on hemodialysis, and then less people are on peritoneal dialysis, and less people get transplanted. This is the flipped way of what it should be. So this graphic shows that kidney transplant the majority of them should get transplanted. Then for quality of life, the next would be PD, followed by hemodialysis. But we are trying to change this, and we are on this journey, and I think we can all, through the GCC and other countries, can do way more than we are doing today. And I think there are lots of details, and not only that for kidney, but also for liver and cardiovascular, etc. So there are lots of risk factors that leads to liver failure, lung failure, etc., that we can work through. Now, this is the DCD that we hope that the GCC and regional countries start to also be appearing on the map. We are working very hard to hopefully soon start donation after cardiac death. But as you can see, we are not yet there. There are lots of, I told you about removing the barriers. So they call it removing a disincentive. So removing something, an obstacle from donation, is fully legitimate. So if a donor wants to donate, but that donor requires financial support to be away from work, compassionate support, all these, there are multiple publications in different countries. We are happy to share. We summarize different countries' programs. We're happy to share them offline. Thank you. Next. Next. Now, something that we really recently started to discuss collaborating is a paired kidney donation exchange. And that is when the family of a donor, of somebody on dialysis wants to donate a kidney, but they are not able to, there could be an exchange so that the donor from the first family donates to the other family, vice versa. This could be a simple simultaneous, meaning the same time paired exchange, or it could be if this chain was triggered by a deceased donation or a donation from somebody who donated, without the non-directed donation. This chain could start with non-simultaneous paired exchange so that many families benefit, because that the reality is that when you have somebody on dialysis, it could be that they have one particular donor, although they have other family members, but it may be that that donor who is not matching or immunologically not possible to donate wants to really donate. And we hosted Professor Alvin Roth, Nobel Prize winner economist from 2012. We just recently hosted him, and also Mike Rees from the Alliance of Paired Kidney Donation from Toledo, Ohio, a nonprofit organization. So we started to be part of their database and network. And we are happy that we hopefully promote this different country and cross-country paired exchange program. We started to have our first few paired exchanges, but we really want to grow this program. And I think together with the rest of the region around us and the GCC, we can really be more successful, because this requires a large database to be able to support more patients. And these are some details of the paired exchange partnership that we believe that hopefully this partnership is not only for us, it is for us and for any country. So we are working with India, we're working with Pakistan, working with, and these are the two types of simultaneously in the kidney chain. Next. When we look at patients on dialysis, you will see that we have, at least in Abu Dhabi, and I'm sure there are more diversity also in the other Emirates, that we have nearly 2,400 patients on dialysis. You see 800 plus are from UAE, but you can see large populations from Pakistan, Philippines, India, Bangladesh, Oman. We have 81 from Oman on dialysis in UAE. And the government of Abu Dhabi covers all nationalities free of charge dialysis. However, it's not only the cost of the dialysis. We have to remember that these individuals really should resume their life and should get transplanted. So what we advocate when we collaborate with Pakistan and say, we have partnerships with Spain, with Portugal to help us start deceased donation. That's why we started to help Pakistan when we had a Pakistani donor. We share the liver and a kidney with them. So hopefully they start deceased donation. But at the same time, they offer that they support us to find solutions for those 180 individuals from Pakistan on dialysis. And same applies, we collaborate with programs from India and other places. And I think since we are talking to our colleagues in Oman, we have also patients from Oman in Abu Dhabi on dialysis. Would love to find a solution for them, either paired exchange or deceased donation or living donation. And these are the different forms of paired kidney donation exchange that we would love to see a global collaboration, because there are successful paired exchange programs in UK, in Canada, in US. There are multiple programs between Australia and New Zealand. However, there are no successful models, and the alliance is really looking forward to have countries collaborate on this one. Next. So the principles of donation we highlighted before in brief, but I think it's really starting to train and train and train. So training is very important. I think public engagement comes a bit later. So I believe that the public believes something that they see. So the relevant public to deceased donation is the families of those deceased donors. And we know deceased donation applies to, or brain death applies to maybe less than 1% of the mortality, or 15% of people who die in the ICU. So the key, I think, pillar to make a difference is to engage the intensive care community, and also to provide the donation opportunity with the families of the deceased or those who are in brain death, because once they see it, they may actually want to donate. And there are other principles. So our vision in UAE is to collaborate with as many countries as possible across GCC, across the Arab countries, Middle East and North Africa, because we believe that by working together, we can go through this journey faster. And being recently on the ISODP, the International Society of Organ Procurement, Donation and Procurement, as a counselor, it's a big vision. Lots of international societies actually want to work hard to start deceased donation in developing countries, in Africa, in Asia. So by us working together, we can achieve multiple goals of hopefully changing the scope of donation and making it available for many more than they are getting it today. Next slide. These are some highlights of different, so in Abu Dhabi, the higher committee provides lots of support. Next. Yeah, next slide. Just for the interest of time, I think, as I said, since 2015 and before we started to train, in fact, I believe maybe since 2015 and beyond, we also had some participants from Oman, from Muscat, I believe, from one of the ICUs. So there are lots of trained individuals, and you know, in the GCC, our countries are quite diverse. The professionals worked and trained in the West. So there are those who already have the training to really start implementing what they used to practice. These are some KPI metrics that we are lucky that our regulator adopted them in a stepwise fashion. They became mandatory by every hospital. And we are now starting to see the results of mandating, but also putting the teams to be responsive to help hospitals have clear definitions and respond to their referrals. I think best practice requires that we plan for the future as well. And then, you know, it's not only the organ donation, but also we need to think about if we could have specific designated retrieval centers, because lots of small hospitals, they would rather transfer if the donor family doesn't mind, because they also have issues. They have shortage of beds, shortage of professionals. So it is a trend in the US to dedicate some beds in large hospitals or standalone facilities to be retrieval centers. And this is what we are working on, as well as starting corneal transplantation and tissue. Next slide, yeah. So organ sharing, I think we highlighted, if we can proceed, yes. And we've, of course, examined the Saudi Center for Transplantation. We always collaborate. Today we had a retrieval and our Saudi colleagues participated. So we are always looking for best practices. Yeah, next slide. And I think there are lots of details that we will share with you about removing disincentives or eliminating donor financial burdens. So we know what are the key elements that are fully legitimate to cover, and that be in line with the Istanbul Declaration. So there are the US details, UK and different countries, and we will send you the details rather than spend too much reading them. So thank you very much. I wanted to maybe give my colleagues more time, and thank you very much for hosting us. And we look forward in discussing how do we collaborate, all of us, for a common goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, for your excellent talk, and thank you for enlightening us with the Emirates experience. We were really glad to hear the few points, or some of the points actually you stressed about having a system in place as a base to start with before start going to the public or start blaming the reluctance from the public, because we believe this is one of the things that we are looking forward at this stage, that we need to have a system and be strong with the system when we start. So hoping this will raise the awareness of the people and make them more actually accepting of the concept of transplantation. Thank you again for your talk. And now we will be moving to our second speaker, Dr. Eduardo Sousa. So the mic is yours. I would like to remind our audience that please feel free to put your questions on the chat or on the Q&A box, and then we will be giving or reading them to the speakers at the end. Also feel free to raise your hand if you would like to speak, of course, at the end when we open the mic for the questions. Dr. Sousa, it's your turn now.
Thank you very much for this kind of invitation to be here tonight with you, sharing my experience and sharing what has been my experience here in this country where I arrived a few weeks ago. So I will do a very short talk, and I will focus mainly on who I am, what's my experience, and what am I doing here in UAE. So who I am, you just mentioned before. I'm an intensivist, ICU consultant. I've been working in intensive care medicine since 2005. I started working as internal medicine specialist and also consultant. Then I shifted to ICU. That was always my dream, to work in ICU. And during all that journey, I've been working with organ transplantation and mainly with organ donation for many years. My hospital is located in a small city in the center of Portugal, the city of Coimbra, where we have the second oldest university in Europe with more than 700 years old. And the city is located in the central region of the country. This is the hospital. In fact, my hospital is a cluster of hospitals. This is the main unit, the biggest one where I work. And this hospital, sorry, serves a population around 2 million people. And that population resides here in this central region, and this main unit has more than 1,100 beds. For many years, we had 20 ICU beds. Currently, we have 35. 15 of them are dedicated to COVID patients. This hospital has a long history in organ donation and transplantation. The first transplant performed in Portugal occurred not in this unit, but in the older one. But it dates from 1969. Leaving the donation, it was a kidney transplanted. Unfortunately, it didn't go well, but it was the kickoff of the whole process of transplantation in this hospital. We started back in 1994 after the approval of the deceased donation law in Portugal, and ever since we've been having very nice figures from organ donation and also from organ transplantation. These are the figures I was mentioning to you. This hospital has the higher rates in the country for many consecutive years. I highlighted here the year of 2008 because in this year we had our standards published, and ever since the numbers growth, and we've been keeping them, as you can see here. A lot of potential donors and many of them becoming actual donors. I will highlight also these last 2 years, 2020, 2021, due to the pandemic problems, we decreased, as everybody in the world, our figures. These numbers are only related to DBD. In the year 2021, I will add here 2 more DCD donors. Two more actual DCD donors. We had five potential, of which 2 became actual. Our donation potential is always very good. This usually we aim for 2 to 3%, and we are always reaching that goal. And these are the numbers. The ratios per million population of my hospital in blue compared to the average of the country. As you can see, we are always above the average of the country. And that has been going on even before 2016. I just brought here these last years, but before it was already like this. Okay, so let's move to the part of what I am doing here in United Arab Emirates. The first time I came here was as a tourist back in 2017, and to work I came here in 2019 for the first time to collaborate in a TPM course that took place in Ajman. And that was the first time I had the opportunity to engage with local doctors and begin to understand how things work here in the country. And later on, I was invited to embrace this project last year. I started preparing my arrival with many months before arriving here, and I arrived here at the end of last November. And I had the chance for 3 weeks to engage with local healthcare professionals and start to build my understanding of the situation in the country. Now, I'm here again, since the beginning of this month, beginning of January. I will stay here until the beginning of April, and I'm based in Abu Dhabi, but I'm reaching all the country, and I put here this four-way arrow. It might seem awkward because one of the arrows is pointing to the sea, but this is just to highlight what Dr. Ali just said. This is to highlight the collaboration with foreign countries. We have planned actions for some countries like Kuwait, Pakistan, and we also have had some meetings with their representatives in order to plan our actions. So this four-way arrow means exactly what it's supposed to mean. Activity across the whole country and overseas. And I'm, as I said, based in Abu Dhabi, collaborating with Emirates Organ Transplant Center. I came here, not by myself, of course, I came here invited by a third party, and that third party is Donation Transplantation Institute Foundation. It's an organization based in Barcelona, Spain, and they are the ones who invited me to come here and collaborate with the organ donation program of the Emirates. Of course, during this journey, the journey is still short, but of course, it's not a bed of roses, and it can't be, and we can easily understand at this stage, it cannot be a bed of roses. And of course, we have several barriers to break, and we will for sure. We are improving. The numbers Dr. Ali showed you demonstrates that a lot has been done last year with the great increase in organ donors, and we aim for more in the near future. So my activity here is developed mainly in the field activity. That's the main purpose of my presence here in the country, but also I have a role contributing to formation. As Dr. Ali said, we have several actions planned, and I will participate in those actions, contributing to the formation of local healthcare professionals, and also some of the countries we mentioned before, and also in the development of protocols to be applied to all hospitals in the country. So this next slide is a representation of the whole chain, the chain of organ donation, and with all its links and connections. And we can easily understand that all these links are important. Everything here must have the same importance. We must dedicate our attention to donor detection, to donor evaluation, to brain death diagnosis, to the consent, to donor management. Dr. Ali just mentioned that donor management is fulcral, has a key role in order to get us good donors with organs in good shape. But of course, everything begins here, donor detection. And the main purpose of our work at this stage has been to engage with hospitals, with healthcare professions in order to obtain more referrals, in order to improve their ability to detect donors or possible donors and refer them. And we are being successful at the moment, and we hope in the near future we can also be successful in improving all these links of the chain. And how do we do this? Very important, these hospital visits. Hospital visits has been the mainstay of our presence here in the country. And I can assure, every time we visit a new hospital, we get a new referral from that hospital. It might not be that same day, it might not be that same week, but for sure, within 2-3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, we are getting referrals from these hospitals. So I would like to highlight the great importance of hospital visits. And those hospital visits, not only for donor detection, but also to collaborate with donor evaluation, with donor management, and also in the brain death diagnosis. We've faced quite a few interesting experiences in different hospitals. I could give you some examples of helping our colleagues doing the not doing the brain death diagnosis, because of course they are very well prepared, but sometimes the families demand a second opinion, and we have had the chance to collaborate to clear families' doubts in order to make the process clear and make them accept the brain death diagnosis, because sometimes we don't have a donor because families don't believe in this, and this must be really well explained to them. You mentioned before the awareness of the population. Of course, that awareness is fundamental, but at this stage, in my opinion, we should focus more on the healthcare professionals' awareness, because if the healthcare professionals don't comply, if they are not committed to the cause will fail. Because you can have the population very aware of this, but if you don't feed the machine, this is a complex machine. If you don't feed this machine with donors, nothing else will happen. So hospital visits, donor detection, healthcare professionals awareness, very important. Of course, I could make a picture of my staying here as this highway with some cracks on the pavement. So we have to fix these cracks, because everything that is new, everything that is beginning has its cracks. So nothing is perfect from the beginning. We wish it would be perfect, but it's not. And most of the times it can't be perfect. So we have these cracks. But of course, if we face these challenges with courage, with accuracy, and in a very honest way, I'm quite sure we will have this kind of pavement. We will have this open road. We will have the open road for our goals to be very well succeeded, and that's what all that we aim for. And in my humble opinion, this country, even this region, have all the conditions. All the conditions are here to have very successful programs. And what are those conditions? Good facilities, good hospitals, very well equipped hospitals, and qualified healthcare professionals. I've seen great people in this country, great hospitals in this country. I'm quite sure that I don't know the reality of Oman. I'm quite sure you also have these conditions there. So just have to work on them and make these people believe in the cause. Because if they believe in the cause, the population will believe in the cause, because everyone wants to be very, very, very well clarified about the whole process. Everybody wants to know how these things work. And if we have healthcare professionals explaining in a honest way, in a way that people understand and believe what they are listening to, I'm quite sure the programs will be very well succeeded. So I would like to finish with this message. This message usually is addressed to the general population, but I would like to address this message to healthcare professionals, because they are the ones who can begin the whole process. Without them, nothing happens. Without them feeding the machine won't work. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be available for any comments or questions in the end of the presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sosa, for your wonderful talk, and thank you for sharing your experience. And thank you on stressing about the point of involving the healthcare providers in the system and understanding the valuable of these organs on a diseased patients. And they are, let's say, they are the first start, or the start has to start with them or go with them first before you go to the educational public. And we will leave the question, as I mentioned, to the end. And now we will be moving to our third, but not least speakers, is Dr. Reginaldo Carlos. Dr. Reginaldo, the mic is yours now.
Good night, everyone. Initially, thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's a pleasure to collaborate with the Oman Transplantation Society. My name is Reginaldo Bonio Manara. I am a Brazilian nephrologist. I worked as an OPO director during 23 years in different institutions in my country. Between 2005 and 2002 and 2005, I collaborate with the transplant teams in Barcelona City, together the Dr. Martin Manalik for the clinic hospital from Barcelona, when established together the team, the program of kidney machine perfusion. For me, it's a big pleasure to collaborate in this night with in this discussion. Congratulations, Dr. Ali and Dr. Eduardo, for the excellent presentation. I will try to explain my experience in Brazil and my experience, a good experience anyway. Brazil is a big country. We have around 200 million people, and the GDP is around $1.5 trillion in 2020. And we have a public health system that gives support to all actions in relation to organ and donation programs. And we have more than 18 nationalities. In Brazil, you have OPOs, organ procurement organizations. Is a different model than in the United States, because the OPO in my country, it's inside of the hospitals, and you have more than 50 OPOs in my country. We have around 400 organ transplant centers.
The slides is not advancing.
Not advancing. And now?
Can you put your slides on the view mode, Doctor?
Yeah, I put the view mode.
Yeah, it's not going. Can you just
No
again
change?
close and do it again? Just close it and do
Okay.
it again. So.
Okay. I stop share. Share again. Okay. It's okay now?
Yes.
Okay. And you have around 400 organ transplants in my country. I'm not sure. Okay. In relation to the world, Brazil had around 3.5 thousand donors per year. It is around 18 donors per million people. But this is the numbers before to the pandemic period. The number of transplants in my country is around 9,000 per year. The great part of transplants from deceased donors, and especially in the kidney transplantation. We performed around 6,000 kidney transplants per year, and the great part, 75% from deceased donors. In my country, of course, we have many transplants, but we need to create a methodology to give support for the transplant teams. Dr. Souza and Dr. Ali showed the importance about the visits of the hospitals. This is the first step of the organ donation process. The name is hospital development. When at a frequent visits to explain to the ICU doctors, to the ER doctors, especially face-to-face, the importance of the organ donation and transplantation. Because the organ donation is part of the job of the intensive care, you know? And the clinical evaluation is the second part. It's very important. And in my country, in the OPO and work, we have many referrals, and all referrals face-to-face, we need to evaluate these potential donors. And the OPO provides support to hospitals and the training of the healthcare professionals in organ donation and transplantation process. And all actions is very important related to donation or transplantation are paid for the public health system, including the treatment after the transplantation. The part that's very important is the hospital development, when the coordinator together the doctor visited the hospitals to ask about the possibility of potential or possible donors inside the hospital. On the other hand, when I receive a referral, the coordinator and the medical consultant go to the hospital and evaluate the case face to face. Now I would like to show you the results in the French OPOs when I worked a few years ago. The first OPO we start into 2007 when I start this methodology, and we increase the number of donors. Initially, we have around 6 donors, but finally, in 4 years, you increase the number to 186 donors. Of course, this OPO, this is a big OPO because you have 50 hospitals and 5 million population, but the number, the donors per million people is around 13.7, 13.80 donors per million population. When I compare another OPO, this is very small OPO when I work at it, we have around 5 or 9 donors per year and a million population. We start the same methodology, the visits hospitals day by day, and talk with the doctors, the nurses, the ER doctors, the ICU doctors, and motivate and explain the importance about the organ donation process. When we start in 3 years, we arrived around 50 donors. It is 49 donors per million population. In this OPO, you have a small population. This is only 1 million population. And finally, in the last OPO that you work until 2021, September 2021, because I'm arrived in here in September 19, we started the same methodology. No, the number of donors is around 100 per year, but finally we obtain around 187 donors 1 year, including in a new methodology because we have a pandemic period. You need to take samples of perform the PCR test to COVID to increase the number of potential donors. But anyway, I think I'm very, very happy in a way because I found a fantastic structure, the hospital structure, and you had the chance to meet excellent healthcare professionals during the organ donation process. It's very, very important because this country have all conditions to give to have a great number, a big number of donors per year, you know? And I have very positive experience because I have seen continuous growth in the number of donors. And the hospital development, it is not theoretically thing. This is a practice. We need to visit. The OPO needed to take a face, to show a face, because the doctor needed our help inside the ICUs. And the result, in few days, it is to increase the number of referrals. And finally, when I have a great number of referrals, we have conditions to evaluate the potential donors. When you have conditions to evaluate the potential donors, you have conditions to do a family approach and organize the next steps inside the hospital, collaborating with the doctors. And finally, the results is the organ transplantation. This will show the structure in the hospital to do an organ retrieval. It is a fantastic structure. And of course, we have the collaboration with the other countries and other teams, for example, the Saudi Arabia. No? Well, but what's the next steps? We have complex formula. What I need to do to increase the number of donors anyway? I think we need to increase the detection of potential donors and motivate the ICU doctors to make more referrals, because it's the first step of the organ donation process. We need to train the healthcare professionals in the break bad news. Dr. Souza talked the same. we need it's not very easy, but it's more common to the ICU doctor or the ER doctor do the procedures. But when you need to talk to the family about not the brain death, but the death of the person, the great part of professionals have many difficulties to conclude this topic together with the family and give the support to the family to the next steps. No? And finally, I think it's important to decrease the time for organ donation process. If I do a hospital development plus a follow-up each referrals, I will find more donors. If I organize a clinical history and protocols, we guarantee the traceability or the safety of the process. And finally, if you have a good relationships and put more training, you will find friends inside the hospitals. This relationship is very, very important to increase the number of donors, not in UAE, but in different countries. And finally, I think that we together we can, because it is a start a new moment in different countries. For me, in particular, it's a fantastic experience to can collaborate with this moment in UAE, and collaborate in the future to Oman, for example. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, and I am at disposal to answers and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reginaldo, for your excellent talk. And it's really wonderful to hear the experience from your side and from your perspective as well. So now we would like to open the mic for the audience to have their questions. Please, I'm just reminding the audience, if you would like to talk, raise your hand so we can direct the questions. Meanwhile, I will just take the questions that is put on the chat. There is a question from Dr. Fatima, and she's asking, is there a transplant recipient waiting list? So how are recipients prioritized on the list? So as a physician, how can we get our patient listed? So she's just asking about your experience. Maybe the question will go to Dr. Ali, and we'll see.
Sure, yeah, thank you very much. I think just like organ donation goes through maturity phase, also the transplant, we currently rely on the transplant centers to list their patients, and then the way we allocate kidneys, let's say, because the other organs, we have a single multi-organ transplant program, Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi Hospital, and the liver and the heart and lung patients are listed there. So they have a protocol in terms of severity for the other organs. Now, for the kidney allocation, we have these transplant centers, and the transplant centers would have some guidelines about how to put their patients on the list. Now, we have not gone yet to a single waiting list, and this requires lots of steps, lots of investments into having the right IT system, the right workup, and we are familiar, and we hosted in our forums expert from Australia, Professor Stephen Holt, have invited other colleagues, and we've listened to the allocation programs that exist in the US and Europe. So at the right time, I think we will probably merge to a single waiting list. However, at this point, we have different transplant programs, kidney transplant programs list their patients. And then the way we allocate, we have organs get allocated to the national pool, and we agreed between the programs. Every now and then we meet and we discuss that maybe one of the kidneys should be given back to the health system or the hospital if it was a transplant center that had a referral, and the other one to go to the national pool. And then we, of course, there are some metrics like the KDPI index for, but basically there are two principles. The principle of utility. You want the transplanted organ to last as long as possible. And then the other principle is a principle of equity. So different patients have the right chance of receiving an organ. So these two principles are always utilized and analyzed in different ways and different formats, and we'll be happy to send a review of the US allocation system that was changed. We recently actually discussed, and also there is another good paper that compares the different, again, it's always a combination of the principle of equity and principle of utility that you want to base listing patients and then also allocating organs to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. There is another question from Dr. Naveen Al-Kalbani. She's the chairman of the transplant committee in Royal Hospital. It's the biggest hospital in Oman. So she's having the questions about, once you identify a donor, does a retrieval team go to the hospital where the donor is, or do you bring the donor to the transplant center? So what is your system in UAE?
We apply a combination of the approach. So if we keep in mind that our target, and usually even the donor families, when they donate, they want to have a maximum impact. So we always, of course, give the right to the donor family to say, no, I don't want to transfer out our donor to another hospital. So that's their fully right. If they are on board, then the next principle is that we want to create the maximum impact of this donation. This may mean that, the other than kidney transplants, the lung and heart and liver, and combined, sometimes there are combined organs like kidney, pancreas, and kidney, liver, may be a challenge for a surgeon or the technical team to retrieve from a far away hospital. And so in those cases, if the donor family is on board, we would rather do a retrieval in the multi-organ transplant to give a maximum chance for the recipients to benefit if the family is happy with that. Now, the other principle is that once in a while, we should make an effort to permit and make an effort to have donation from the referral hospital, because that would improve the culture of donation, and also that would give a positive spirit and positive. I mean, today we had a retrieval in one of our hospitals, and there were teams from Saudi Arabia, from inside the country, from Dubai, and just, as the donor, she was a 23-year-old engineer, as the donor was being transferred from the ICU to the OR, there were nearly 150 professionals just standing in line in that corridor, paying full respect. So it is important to support the culture of donation in donation hospitals. But then, sometimes it's a multi-organ retrieval. If the family doesn't mind, we transfer to the other hospital. But even if we do that, then we also offer the donation hospital, if some of their staff or their donation champion wants to be in the OR, wants to participate, so we do a variety of ways to improve the culture of donation.
So that's mean actually your system is already ready to do both systems in the transplant centers and none. This is actually excellent. Now, maybe the second question is to Dr. Sosa. So who take care of discussing the donation part with the families for brain death patients in the ICU? So do you have a dedicated team, or who exactly do that part in the ICU?
You mean in my country or here in the UAE?
In both areas, if you don't mind.
In both, because our system relies a lot on the intensivists. And our law has a big difference from the law of the UAE, because in my law, every citizen is considered a donor unless that same citizen goes to an office and says otherwise while he's still alive. So whenever we have a possible donor or a potential donor, we consider that as a donor unless, and we'll have to check that those records. And if there's nothing mentioned, if there's not a registry saying that that person doesn't want to be a donor, is considered a donor. Of course, after that, we talk to the family because we are not going to retrieve any organs without the knowledge of the families. A few years ago, maybe around 10 to 15 years, we faced some kind of refusal. The first reaction of the families was, I don't want to. But after a small talk, after explaining what's involved in all this situation, most of them would accept. Nowadays, it's not usual to have a denial. Most of them accept immediately. And so that talk is done mainly by the intensivists. The intensivist explains the diagnosis, the brain death diagnosis, and after that explains to the family that according to our law, that person is considered a donor, and that we have to inform the office responsible for donation and transplantation, and if they oppose to that situation. So that is all explained by the intensivists. Here in UAE, as in many other countries, you have to distinguish both sides. So the intensivist is responsible until the establishment of the brain death diagnosis, and never mentioning the organ donation part. Because as we can easily understand, if the intensivist jumps to the other side, to the organ donation part, he will break the trust with that family. That family trusts that physician is doing his best or her best to improve their relative condition. If they mention organ donation, they will for sure break that trust, and that will all fall apart from that moment on. So intensivist talks about brain death diagnosis, then he explains to the family that here in the country, and please correct me, Dr. Ali, if I'm wrong, that there is a higher committee responsible for the difficult cases, and that higher committee will send some people to the hospital to talk to that family and explain to them what's involved in that situation. And then after introducing themselves, after explaining everything, then the organ donation topic will be approached. So that's the reality here, and in most of the countries in the world, because laws like the Portuguese, maybe there are more, but I only know the Austrian case that has a similar law. All other countries, they have laws like the Emirates one. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah,
I think it's like, as Eduardo said, is we don't refer to our team as a donation team because we don't know if that family accepted the brain death, and it's totally not allowed to talk about donation when the family is in denial or they have not absorbed, they may think is in coma. So we ask hospitals to offer that there is a committee that collaborate between different ICUs, and they discussed about difficult cases. Then we approach the families, and we try to see if, how much they understand what happened, if there are direct or indirect clues about what were the wishes of the deceased person, and then gradually take them through. And once we know that it may be that they want us to help them with a second opinion with some doctors from other hospitals, virtually or physically, and then we try to have them be on board. Now, if they are from international, we also offer them to see their relatives on video. We try to find translators who speak their language, offer them, if they have a doctor that they trust, they want to be part of the discussion. And then we kind of sense if they are ready to hear about something called donation. Then we talk to them. And we also say that, it doesn't apply to everybody. So we took them gradually. In fact, yesterday we approached a family in Dubai with Dr. Reggie and Dr. Eduardo and Mr. Ayman, actually you can't imagine the parents of a young 17-year-old athletic who passed away because of AV malformation and bleeding. After the 1-hour discussion, although she lost her son, she said, "I'm really relieved that there is something about donation." She felt much better, although she's been in really difficult time. But now she feels her son was a champion when he was alive and athletic and quite, doing very well. And she really felt very good about her son being a hero after saving lives. So we really go through various stages and try to analyze, and there are various training programs for having these difficult discussions.
Now, Dr. Ali, you did mention
If I may,
please.
To add just something else, because Dr. Huda, as intensivist, you easily understand this. If we are honest with the families, and I mean us intensivists, and since day one, if you explain very clearly what is going on, if you have a bad prognosis case and you explain to them things like they are, and with the subsequent days, things not improving, you keep updating them on the real situation, when the brain death comes, they will easily understand. And I think you can understand that, because we are intensivists. We deal with this every day, unfortunately. And that's, from my point of view, that's the correct way to approach the families and to make them understand in a more easy way when the fatal outcome.
Yes, you are actually right. But the challenge usually comes when it is something abrupt happening or something acute happened to the patients, as maybe the case that Dr. Ali just mentioned. Unexpected sudden brain death. That is usually the challenge. And you are in this dilemma between losing the organs, because as you know, all the complications that might happen to the body, and between giving enough time for the family to grasp the shock. So maybe these are the challenging cases that as an intensivist, we always find it harder to approach. Now, Dr. Ali, you mentioned about the KPIs and the JODA system that you implemented. So this question is mentioned by Dr. Rashid Al-Araimi. So he said, how do you monitor the effectiveness of your donor identification strategy? Do you somehow monitor missed referral cases? Like, how do you, I think the prioritizing strategy he's specifically asking about. So what, do you have a system or a KPI to look on this aspect?
Well, I think we are still going through the maturity phase. So we, first of all, I think different countries have different, so we have a protocol in Arabic and English, a pathway, and then it's a 5-step process. But the key is, we say it could be of any age. Our youngest donor was a 2-week-old baby in UAE, ventilated somebody, and then different systems put a Glasgow Coma scale of, let's say, 8. I've seen the widest was 8, and then the more common practice is Glasgow Coma scale less than 5. So we trigger it with the 5, but we say 5 within the hospital, less than 5. Sorry, 8 with less than 8 within the hospital, less than 5 to refer to us. We also implemented some IT algorithm because UAE has followed electronic medical record system now. So we have also an IT trigger. So some hospitals, the EMR triggers a referral, but the key is before you have too many referrals, the system should be ready and responsive, because if we generate too many referrals, but we are not supporting them and not, making progress, also the hospitals will feel disappointed that nothing is happening with the referral. So we do lots of training. We are putting some support system for the families, for the ICUs. And also we are working with our regulator to hopefully gradually these KPIs, once it's mandated, that we also audit. I think the stage that we are trying to get into is that we, of course, we met the systems that exist in Spain and Portugal, but we also talk to the US procurement organizations, that we are supposed to get a monthly mortality statistic from every hospital. And then you go through the referrals that you're getting proactively, but you are also analyzing that the monthly ICU mortality and also the monthly hospital mortality, because also depending on the case mix and if that hospital is a neurosurgical hospital or not, you will have some general and then every 3 months, I mean, that's a maturity we are working towards, is that to get the referrals, but then get retrospective data about their monthly statistics, and then every 3 months or monthly, you can do a case review together to learn from. So I think these are the discussions that we are going through. It's not mandating the KPIs without the additional systems that you would put in place. I know in the US, for example, they have a metrics of, how many cases a premature discussion happened, how many cases, donor maintenance wasn't ideal, how many cases, and they monitor and how many missed referrals were there. And we can send you these metrics, but it also requires some work to prepare the hospitals as well as the support that you will and work with the regulator.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Ali. I think Dr. Ahmed has a questions. So Dr. Ahmed, you can ask a question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huda, and for all the speakers. And we congratulate them actually for the rapid increase of the donors pool and number of transplantation despite the pandemic. Mashallah, in 2021 there was a good number. My question to Dr. Ali and his team also mainly about legal part. It's very tricky, very important, and we have to make it clear for everybody, and all people are actually reluctant when it comes to the law. So I wonder now, who signed the consent of donation after this? I mean, is there a hierarchy of the family member? And does that also differ if the patient has will or does not has will? And if there is no relative in UAE, how you contact them? Do you get like online consent? Or if it is non-Emirati, do you need to consult or get approval of the embassy? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for the opportunity and for the kind invitation. I think, yes, we have in our law a hierarchy of those who are able to sign the consents. So it's, the father, the brothers, the uncles. So we have that hierarchy, I think, that is existing. Yes, we do communicate with family members abroad, and we either record or have translators who translate, and we document our discussions. And I think we also try to be resourceful to the families, but I think the legality, I attended, for example, and this is quite revealing, is that I attended the forum with the Mohan Foundation in India, and this is a non-profit organization that supports donation. We have some good collaboration. They analyzed in their 25 years of experience with deceased donation and with living donation, that when it comes to living donation, there are lots of legal issues and lots of degree of certainty or lack of certainty. And then when they put it in the same table, comparing to deceased donation, in a large country like India with lots of, different people with different backgrounds, different languages, they were hardly, issues. So living donation, if we try to apply living donation, issues and living donation, let's say fears of, how accurate we want to be. I think deceased donation is really much easier than it sounds, because, the family, that particular family, their toughest moment is for them to know that their loved one passed away. And then gradually they are looking for resolution. They are looking for something to say that the life of this loved one didn't go without, cause. So I think that our practice is that deceased donation is much easier than living in terms of issues and legalities that goes with it. Once you have a number of people around, trained to handle the different scenarios. So involving the families early is good. It's very important that we emphasize that, deceased donation doesn't take place over a few hours. It may take, so it's also important that we make sure that the intensive care team are consistent with the message. So when team doesn't say that this person passed away and then the other person unintentionally saying, well, there's a small hope, then we confuse the families, So all in all, yes, we have a hierarchy for who can sign. We rely on family members who are abroad. But I think our experience shows that the discussion is really family members are looking forward in a gradual way for them to be offered to donate. And we consider, since our president signed the law, we believe that it is a right for every deceased or for every brain deaf eligible donor or potential donor, it's their right to be approached. And if we don't approach them, then we are not giving them the right.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Ali. So there is a question from one of our Omani doctors who is currently in Canada. She's actually a hematopathologist. So she has one technical question. So let me read it for you. So she's asking about calculating PRA, so benign reactive antibodies. She believes this is as essential pre-transplant parameters for the recipient. So she basically asking whether there is any local calculator and what is the situation? Do you test for it in the United Arab Emirates for your donors?
Yes. Yeah. So a key pillar, what we didn't discuss tonight, is a key pillar for the program is the HLA lab. So the HLA lab, they need to be able to do virtual cross-matching. They need to have access to regular blood samples, the PRA panel of reactive antibodies. So this would help the HLA lab to have prior information, and also the programs need to agree on the classification for highly sensitized, those that should bypass the waiting list. And it's a unique opportunity for them if they get negative cross-match in a donor. So yes, we rely significantly on our HLA lab, and these are available to us.
Excellent. Excellent. The other questions is actually again for ICU. So excuse me, because I'm an intensivist, so I'm trying to address some of the aspects that we are actually think we might face it here in our country. So one of the issue we have been discussing recently is declaring the time of death. So what is the practice in UAE? Do you declare the time of death during the brain death testing after you have the testing, or do you do it after the organ recruitment? So what is the practice in your country?
I'm familiar with this debate and discussion in Islamic countries. There are lots of details about, when somebody's well and somebody's the family, there are lots of implications. So we, not to confuse the public, and we adopted something that we believe it's pragmatic and practical, is that we refer to somebody meeting the criteria for neurological criteria for death. However, issuing or writing the death certificate happens in the same day that deceased or that individual who died is moving out of the intensive care unit. So it's moving out of the intensive care unit, either to the OR or to the mortuary. And that is the same day that we sign the death certificate, so that we don't run into legal and other, because we have to face other people who may not be as oriented. And, technically and effectively, somebody could be dead, for 10 days. And then they would say, well, somebody is, they have the death certificate in hand. And then in 10 days later, if there was, the family was in denial and they could not agree to care withdrawal. So we wanted to avoid this point because it could really be a hurdle to donation. So we signed the death certificate before the deceased leaves the ICU, either to the OR. So when they are going to the OR for retrieval, the death certification is signed. Those surgical teams are fully medico-legally protected to perform the retrieval, and also on the same day that they are going to mortuary. This way, we try to not have a situation where we sign a death certificate, and then for some reason, care is continuing, and then it creates some confusion out there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for this elaborations, because as you mentioned, this is also has been a debate in our side, and we are just trying to reach into some sort of understanding, and we are hoping that we will also reach to something that can fit the cultures and the understanding of the population in Oman as well. I think we covered most of the questions, or all of the questions that has been forwarded to us tonight. So, and at the end, I would like to thank you all for giving this opportunity to us to hear from your experience despite your busy schedule, and it's a working day. It was really enlightening, and we are hoping from by sharing this experience, we will magnify our knowledge as well as our understanding in order for us to start our program in the country. We are also hoping to see you, inshallah, in the futures physically here in Muscat. And we are hoping also to have a lot and more collaboration as well. I would like also to thank the Oman Diabetes Society for providing us with the platform tonight, and not to forget our audience who joined us for the discussion tonight. I understand most of the audience were doctors, and the majority of them, they are nephrologists, intensivists, hepatologists, pediatrics, and adults. And this is actually a good sign that the society might be going in the right direction in Oman. And it was really enlightening to see the numbers and the slide that Dr. Ali provided. The numbers were really strong, and to see the jump last year, it is a big record, and we hope we will start, and we hope, inshallah, we will be having collaborations between the both country. I would like to extend also our thanks to Dr. Sosa and to Dr. Reginaldo for sharing their experience. Especially they are coming from different backgrounds, and they are trying also to implement some of the aspects in the culture of Emirates. So thank you very much for accommodating us tonight, and I would like you to continue to have a wonderful evening tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A pleasure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali and Dr. Eduardo, Dr. Rinaldo. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure, and we look forward in collaborating soon. Together, I think we can achieve big things. Thank you very much.
Sure, inshallah, we'll be in touch with you to have further discussion.
Thank you.
Inshallah, good night.
Good night.
After all.